Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shate, and we're the Hazes.
Welcome to the Love Haze podcast, where we believe that healing and wholeness are not just destinations.
That's right, we believe they're a journey. And here on the Love Haze, we talk about how to navigate through it.
Let's talk about how we have a tendency to continue putting ourselves on trial after we've made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we have trouble being able to forgive ourselves when we do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
We have to learn how to be okay with ourselves and forgive ourselves. We can make a different choice, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how we do that. Welcome to our Black Love Journey. Let's go.
Let's go.
So, Mrs. Hayes,
Mm-hmm.
how do we come to this topic?
I would say, so I just finished reading The Four Agreements, which is a book I started a long time ago. And I do this thing where I buy a gazillion books. I buy books like most women buy shoes. And so I allow my spirit to tell me when I'm ready to pick one up. If I'm just feeling a vibe, I'm like, oh, okay, it's time for me to read this book. But I will always purchase it when I know that there's an interest in the story. So I started The Four Agreements a long time ago and only got through, I think, the first agreement, which is the second one. Don't take anything personal. So be impeccable with your word is the first one. Don't take anything personal. Put the book down. And I think that was enough of what I needed at the moment. And we've even talked a lot about the Four Agreements on the podcast, specifically about not taking things personal because of the agreements people have with themselves. Is how they show up in the world.
Right.
I finished it recently on a flight. And it's so interesting how timely it was, right? Like, that's what I mean when, like, the story will reveal itself when it's time for me to read it. And in the Four Agreements, there is this section where it says something like, human beings are the only species to pay repeatedly for the same offense. And it used the example of like a dog, for example, or our pets, right? So whenever our pet does something wrong, we reprimand them and we're like, no, go sit in the corner, go do whatever.
Right.
But then it's over with. We don't keep saying, hey, you remember that time when you peed on my floor?
Right.
Or do you remember the time when you ate my underwear? Or do you remember the time? It's just, they pay for the offense and that's it. With human beings, we've done it. We'll do a thing. My bad, I apologize, or however it's reconciled. And then we will continue to remind ourselves of the thing that we've done. Like, just will not let it go.
Right.
And the book also mentions like this idea that sometimes people can be attached to pain. So, you and I were talking a little bit about, well, is it that, now we somehow identify with the pain that was caused? Did we somehow identify with the injury itself? Anyways, I say all of that to say, came from the book. In this book, it also says forgiveness is the only way to heal. And I was like, ooh, that's something that I think is worth unpacking. So here we are unpacking how we continue to put ourselves on trials. Mr. Mental Health Professional, what is like typical, and I hesitate to use the word typical, but what, in terms of your practice, what have you seen in terms of like human behavior after a mistake? Or around mistakes?
I think a lot of what we see with when we make mistakes is we immediately kind of start to beat ourselves up because we feel like we should have known better, have had enough experience to make a better choice, or almost like a constant like, how did you let this happen?
Yes, how could you?
How could you not be more careful? Like, what were you thinking? Those types of questions. And a lot of times it ends up being it starts off unhealthy in that way because you can't undo it in that moment. There's nothing that you can do. Those questions, like after the fact, don't help a lot. And I think, a portion of what we're getting to even in this conversation is about like, how do I remind myself of how bad it hurt?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that I won't make the mistake again. And a lot of our plans are like to continue to remind ourselves of how much it hurt so that we won't make the same mistake in the same way again. And I don't know that that's a healthy way of doing things.
I would say it's probably not intentional. So I'll think about myself, for example. I am the person that will beat the dead horse when it comes to myself. Like
Hmm.
how I can think of mistakes from like 20 plus years ago where I still comes up and I'm like, I wonder if I how could I have made a different choice, or I wish I had made a different choice. So I'm an expert at
Hmm.
like retrying myself for the same offense. And it's not, and on my part, it's not so that I remember not to do it again. For whatever reason, it's I don't even know if there's a reason. It's just like it just comes up out of nowhere, and I guess that's our automatic thoughts, our automatic negative thoughts, or the enemy, whatever you choose to call it. There is an accuser, and something will be adjacent, and it'll
Hmm.
remind me of this thing I went through, and be like, "Dang, you did do that." I wish she hadn't, or I wish she had chosen differently.
Hmm.
And there is no reason. I don't feel like it helps me to not do it again, or maybe it does a little bit, but more than anything, it just sucks me back in to kind of like not enoughness almost.
Yeah, and that's problematic because like how do we have get to the point of having gratitude for our journey when we like have this constant like regret about parts of it?
Yeah.
Like I would not trade, who I am and what I learned. Those some of those lessons and that kind of stuff, they were painful at the time that it was happening,
Mhm.
but they shaped like who I've become.
Mhm.
So how dare I then, go back and regret this part that shaped me into the man that I've become.
Mhm.
So, it is about centering and about learning to have gratitude for the entire journey, even the parts that were painful in that moment, even for the
Mhm.
parts where I feel like maybe I could have made a better choice. But even the judgment that I have for myself in that moment and wishing I had made a better choice, it is on the back end of like what I learned
Yeah.
from the thing,
Yeah.
and I don't think we get the opportunity to have both. I don't get to be this person that I am without that part of it.
I hear you and I agree. Like I love who I am right now, and who I
Mhm.
am is because of all of the things that I went through. And still, sometimes you just wish like God, and I don't want to say sometimes you just wish as isn't that's general.
Mhm.
It is likely very specific to me and my perfectionism issues that
Mhm.
I have. Like, you know, um something I'm always talking to my therapist about, human. Like to be human is to err, is that a saying, right?
Mhm.
So um and how, I'm just really, really tough on I expect, you know, a lot. And that is learned behavior also. I want to
Mhm.
acknowledge I didn't come here putting that amount of pressure on myself. It's something that I've picked up and I've literally run with it.
Mhm.
Self-imposed 1000%.
But I've learned how to beat up on myself really well
Mhm.
from my upbringing and
Mhm.
my dad who was very strict in that way, and he used his words to correct,
Mhm.
and they were often very harsh words.
Mhm.
So sometimes when I speak to myself in a very harsh way,
Mhm.
and I call it like having control. There is some desire to be perfect in
Yeah.
that because I don't want that reprimand.
Mhm.
And when I make a misstep, um, I have a tendency to talk harsh to
Yeah.
myself in those moments because that's how I learned to reprimand and to be better. Does not mean that it's healthy or that it's okay.
Yeah.
I am constantly having to um, feel like my therapist is reprimanding me for, like when I tell her, that I talk harshly to myself to motivate myself to go to the gym, to
Mhm.
motivate myself to do the things that I am supposed to do. Um, and I call it discipline, being disciplined.
Mhm.
And she consistently asked me like, how long are you going to talk to yourself like that?
Yeah.
How long are you going to hold on to that? And I, at some point, it started to stick with me that I needed to be taught harsh to.
Yeah.
Like I needed to be cussed out in order for me to motivate myself to do things. And so when I misstep, when I show my humanity even to myself, I'll still get upset sometimes about that. And we don't have to do ourselves that way. And it's not okay.
I hear you. It sounds good.
Mhm.
And immediately like, how do you let it go? So I want to mention a couple of different ways the same idea has presented itself to us even just today.
Mhm.
So I love what you mentioned earlier in terms of double jeopardy. So like even the
Mhm.
movie, like literally the United States will not try you again for the same offense.
Mhm.
Yet here we are, just putting ourselves on trial repeatedly. Michael Todd has a series, Cuffing Season, and we just watched again Cuff to Condemnation. And the way he presents it is conviction versus condemnation, right?
Mhm.
So to be convicted for a wrongdoing versus to be condemned, like your spirit, your being to be condemned. Think about Brene Brown, the shame versus guilt, right?
Mhm.
Guilt is like conviction. I did this one thing, I feel bad about it, I am remorseful for this thing.
Mhm.
Shame has somehow like you've embodied the offense. And so I made a mess versus I'm messy, right?
Mhm.
I made a mess is the guilt, the conviction. I'm messy. I'm somehow inherently a messy person,
Mhm.
as that's become you've picked up the shame, you've picked up the condemnation. And so
Right.
we are trying to find our way to not like having condemnation, like
Mhm.
forever damning ourselves
Right.
for a mistake that we've made.
And one of the things that he said today that stuck with me, and this is Michael Todd. That is, he said, "I did it. I am not it."
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And yeah, I did that thing, but that is not who I am.
Yeah.
And that is so. Those few words, they encompass like how I have treated myself in the past. Um,
Which one? I'm
I,
it.
I did it,
Mhm.
but I'm not it,
I'm not it.
right?
Mhm.
I did this thing. I'm guilty of this thing, right? But that is not who I am.
Mhm.
And for so long, I have taken those things and said, "This is who I am because
Yeah.
I did this thing, and forgive me for it." Because I did it. I want to be forgiven for it, but I still tie my humanity to that thing that I
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
and I never give myself permission to be off trial for it. I have this self doubt
Yeah.
because I am talking about all of this stuff, and I'm guilty of that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
He talks about being a cheater, right? How he labeled himself a cheater,
Mhm.
after cheating,
Mhm.
right? I did this thing, but I'm not this thing,
Mhm.
right? And so often people can't. Um, we try to label it for ourselves, and we kind of we don't give ourselves permission to step into what we're actually supposed to be doing with what we learn because we have ourselves on trial for what we went through,
Yeah.
for what we did,
Yeah.
and that thing is a part of your story. One of the things that stuck with me when I was pledging is this poem that we had to learn, and it is just centered around like being able to meet with victory and defeat and treat those two imposters the same.
Invictus.
You know,
Oh.
I'm about to haze you up.
My bad. My
20
bad.
years
Yes.
in and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But victory and defeat, they are both temporary,
mm.
right? And they are both fleeting. They are not things that last. And when you think about the journey, yes, I want victories. Yes, I will experience defeats, but I don't get to, in order to be successful, I don't get to have one victory and ride that on out.
Yeah.
By the same token, I don't get to have one defeat and that be my defining moment. Your
Mhm.
victories and your defeats are not your defining moments. The way that you live your life in its totality is your defining moment. It is what you are supposed to be doing. It
Mhm.
is what life is, being able to experience successes and failures and being able to bob and weave and do the things that you need to do to keep living,
Mhm.
right? Grandmama used to say, child, you just don't know, just keep living,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It is that we can shrink, right? And we can tell ourselves, I'm not qualified to do this thing because of what I've done. I shouldn't be out here telling people about being faithful when I cheated. I shouldn't be out here telling people about this thing about my relationship with God. I shouldn't be out here telling folks about how to heal when I hurt people in
Yeah.
the past,
Yeah.
right? But I had to do those things in order to do this thing, and I
Mhm.
won't let it shrink my voice, and I won't allow that thing to be the thing that keeps me from walking into what I'm ultimately called to do.
Yeah.
And I ain't gonna beat myself up about that. That's a part of my story. Is what I'm supposed to be doing. I had to experience that in order to know this.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I still think it's kind of easier said than done. Can that push us into like the haze? Like, what is the haze then of choosing differently, like you said in our intro, choosing to understand it, to experience the offense or the mistake, the misstep as a conviction and not like an indictment on who
Mhm.
we are.
The world just don't need that from us.
What's the haze? Like,
The haze is making a different choice. Like with all the different arguments that I presented during this, you know what you said? You're like, I hear you.
How?
And that is the want and the desire to hold on to the thing. Like I want to be able to beat myself up.
I
And
don't really want that though. I somehow want to have not done it or something.
why you trying so hard to hold on to it? Like
Mm.
I hear you, but
It's not that I want to hold on to it. I think for me, I'm still trying to uncover how to let go of it, how to make a different choice. And we got some tools I think today that I've heard
mm,
repeatedly we can talk about, but I want to stay here for just a little bit longer.
I, I I think the haze is like choosing yourself every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like saying that I'm not gonna beat myself up is like it is like loving yourself. When you love someone, you forgive them when they make a mistake
That's fair.
because that is what being in relationship requires. When I say that I want to be in relationship with people, it is not that I expect them to be perfect inside this space.
Yeah.
I want to be in relationship with you because I want to experience this with you.
Yeah.
And experiencing people's humanity and walking through life with them, you understand that there will be missteps. People gonna handle you wrong, maybe not intentionally, sometimes intentionally. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you gonna get the selfish as hell part of folks.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you understand that about being in relationship with people, then the first relationship that you have is the one with yourself. So why would you not do that for you?
That's a whole word, and that really does hit home for me as someone who has so much experience, like giving other people way more grace than I give to myself, or way more. Yeah, I think grace is probably the best word. Way more.
Mhm,
I'm trying to think if there's another word for grace, but it really is that like grace to be
mhm,
themselves. It's okay. More encouragement to other people, and that is just a full circle moment for me. Like I need to
mm,
actually love myself the same way. So ever since we talked to the Wrights, in our last episode, and they were just
mhm,
talking to us about the illustration of being in relationship with money, like money as a person. And since that illustration, I have literally picked it up and tried to apply it to different areas of my life. So being in a relationship with our body is something that we've talked
mhm,
about. Maybe we'll need to unpack that a little bit in another episode. But being in relationship with myself, like if I were outside of myself somehow,
mhm,
how would I treat me? And why
mhm,
can't I start treating me that way now?
mhm. And they're the example that they use was like for money would
Mm,
be the same.
mm,
For me, like if if I spoke to myself the way that I speak, to other people, what I'm saying, would I want to be in relationship with me?
mhm,
When I think about the way that I've
mhm,
spoken to myself when I make a mistake, especially you and me, both of us with our people pleasing asses,
mhm.
right? We would immediately be like, "Hey, it's okay.
You're all
Don't worry
right.
about it.
You're
It's all right. Like
human.
you're human. Why don't we? talk to ourselves in that way. It'd be hard
I
as hell on
don't
ourselves,
know.
but and if I'm going to be a people pleaser, then at least like please myself,
Yeah.
you know, have some grace for myself. Um,
I think, I mean, back to what we were saying before, it is what we learned when we were growing up. And again, our families, our parents, the people who raised us always did the very best that they could with who they were and the information that they had.
mhm,
But so setting a standard or expectations of excellence on me. And of course, no parent means that to the detriment of like your
no,
spirit, but me taking that even further and like so in every area of my life, I need to live up to this certain standard. I need to
mhm,
perform at this standard. And that
mhm,
has caused me to like really not treat myself the way that I would treat someone else. And then for you, like you said, your dad talking to you the way like he did, you pick that up and so now like that's how you
mhm,
parent, yourself. That's how
mhm,
I parent myself now.
mhm,
Um and it's really something to think about, especially as we try to we pray to parent,
mhm,
be parents ourselves. Like we should really work on parenting us
yeah,
before they get here so we're not doing the same thing. Yeah.
mhm, yeah, and it is not that it's not difficult, right? It
Mhm.
is it's an act of self love and choosing self love every day.
Yeah.
Choosing to not do the thing that is would be automatic for me. It
Mhm.
is so automatic and so ingrained in who I am
Mhm.
that usually is my automatic response. Taking the time to um, catch it, check it, and change it.
Oh, you're
Mm.
gonna have to re-say that. Catch it, check it, and change it.
So that's what we use with the population that I work with to get them to work on their automatic thoughts. It is also something that I use for myself. It is I'm realizing that I have automatic thoughts, right? That
Mhm.
will pop up for me when I experience something. My duty is then to catch it. So I hear myself about to have this negative thought, or I hear the negative thought itself.
Mhm.
All right. Then once I catch it, I have to check it. You got to check that at the door, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't negative thoughts can't be here. And then you have to change it. You
Mm.
have to catch it, check it, change it. That's the work that we have to do.
Mm. That's good. You done just ushered us on into navigation here. I see.
Yeah.
Catch it, check it, change it, disrupt the thinking.
It is disrupting
Mhm.
and being a disruptor of those
Mhm.
negative thoughts.
Mhm.
That's why you can hear the information and be like, I hear you. Yeah, you do. But the work that you have to do is then to do something
Check it and
about
change
it.
it.
You
Yeah.
have to catch that thing and check it, and you got to change it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we can do to avoid doing that work
Yeah.
if we really want to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was trying to think of that's basically what Michael Todd said in his session in his sermon to replace the condemning thought or the condemnation with the truth. And
Hmm.
what the truth is. And then we were processing in the same moment. Well, that's essentially what affirmations are. You
Hmm.
take this limiting belief, you catch it, right?
Hmm.
You disrupt it and replace it by affirming what the truth actually is.
Hmm.
And so, in this instance, um, we could be saying like, "Oh, I did this thing, and that means I am therefore this." When really we should be saying, "Actually, I'm a human being.
Hmm.
I made this choice in this moment, but the truth is that doesn't define me. I am
Hmm.
still whole. I am still healed. I am still wise." Or,
Hmm.
I did cheat. I am not a cheater.
Hmm.
I am still honest. I'm still truthful. Like
Hmm.
affirming something different, disrupting that thought, and so that you can be not repeating it just for, I think, repetition's sake. I think also there has to be changed behavior as part of that, right? Like it
Yeah,
can't
it
be
does.
like you're still in the bullshit and you're just
Hmm.
trying to affirm something different. But yeah, I think in earnest, if it's just about we had a conversation about the stories we tell ourselves. It's about telling ourselves a different story
Hmm.
about who we are.
Right. A part of that story for me too is also being like, I'm out here.
Hmm.
I am living.
Hmm.
I am doing. the best I can with the information that I have currently,
Mhm.
and I will get it right sometimes. I will get it wrong sometimes, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
So many folk, and help for me, so many times in the past, I have allowed like the fear of making the same mistake over again to like stop the progress, to keep me from moving forward, to
Mhm.
keep me from um living this life and living it fully.
Mhm.
Just being so untrusting of myself, like, okay, you can't trust yourself to go out there and not do the wrong thing, so don't go anywhere. Right. And which is, I'm called to greater. I know that you are called to greater. And so if I err while out here doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then I'm gonna navigate my way through like forgiving myself.
Yeah. That that brings to mind basically an aversion to failure. So I've read some leadership practices about how some leaders are encouraging basically taking the fear out of failure. It's something I actually used to do as an educator in my dance classes. I would always stress progress over perfection. And I would
Hmm.
give you partial credit, some credit when, we're grading on movement if you recovered well. So
Hmm.
the tendency, especially in dance, especially with people who aren't movers, they'll come in, do something. If they didn't get it right, they just stop altogether.
Hmm.
And I will always be preaching, like, what do you do if you mess up? And they would know to say, keep going. And I would say, what do you do if you forget everything? And they would say, keep going. And even as I'm taking notes on a performance, I'd be like, you recovered so well.
Hmm.
To the point to see someone go from the beginning of a semester, like freezing, like if they made a mistake, to fumbling through it at the end of the semester, even if they forgot it all, literally can bring tears to my eyes because that means
Hmm.
they trusted themselves enough to just
Hmm.
figure it out or to just should just move, even if
Hmm.
it's like not on beat or not the choreography. I read something recently, literally maybe like within the past week or so, or it could have been something I heard on masterclass too. Either
Hmm.
way, I think it was a masterclass by the owner of Spanx, the founder of Spanx, and she was saying their company has a culture of really just talking about the failure. I hope I'm attributing that to the right masterclass. But either way, the point is, this leader was like, she encouraged the entire company to do like stand up comedy, and everybody had to get up
Hmm.
and do at least one line, or they get up and talk about the failures they had together. And like we'll be looking for something to say, like, ooh, I made this mistake. I'm gonna share it
Hmm.
with everybody. Like to really just have a culture of like, I made a mistake. This is what I
Hmm.
learned from it. I'm moving
Hmm.
forward. Gosh, I'm glad you said that because now I just really need to remind myself of that in my everyday life,
Hmm.
just in general.
So I hear you, but how? You just gave us a whole lesson on how and how you did that with folks that you were
Because it's other
taking in
people.
dance.
It's other
Hmm.
people. It's not me. Do you see?
Hmm.
Do you see?
Do you also see that you're worthy
Yes.
to
I
just
do.
keep going?
I do.
Right. That's what we're all worthy of. Like figuring out how to keep going.
Mm. And not get stuck on like, did that mistake mean anything? Or, like assigning meaning to the mistake,
Hmm.
which I think is something that I've been prone to do. Like
Yeah,
I assign meaning
absolutely.
to this mistake. It must
Mhm.
mean that I am.
So those are ways that we navigate.
Mm.
You know, we are. I am choosing me every day because there's beauty in the mistake. Um, there's beauty in my entire story. Um, and those ebbs and flows, they are my path.
Yeah. I can say I'm learning to choose me
Mm.
more and more each day. And the ways that I've been able to choose me outrightly over the past couple of years in ways that I have not probably my whole
Mhm.
life. I'm really sincerely proud of and excited to see, you know, how I choose myself even more. But it's still very much a journey for me because I can, um, really honor my voice, my choice, give myself
Mhm.
grace in one moment and still be like, girl, you did that. You should have known better. Like
Mhm.
I can both and. So
Yeah.
I'm still very much a work in progress.
Yeah. All of us are though.
Mhm.
You know, even with me saying that I'm choosing me every day, like that's an affirmation that I have to give myself.
Mm.
It is not that I have it figured out. It is that
Mhm.
I'm affirming that over my life, that that is my truth,
Yeah.
and that I am choosing me.
Yeah.
And that the same thing that I give to other people, the way that I want to love you, I want to love in a way that welcomes error, and that we've built up enough of a foundation here that if we fall, we won't be broken.
Mm. Mhm.
And so I want to treat myself the same way.
Yeah.
I built up enough trust in myself, and I'm strong enough to where if I fall, I won't be broken.
Yep.
I can keep dancing.
Amen.
Hey, turn up.
Yes.
Taught your boy a little something. Man.
Turn up.
We're gonna
Yes,
do
get
the
it.
we're
Get
gonna do the
it.
cuffing challenge
Get
after this.
it. You're right.
All right. So, um, what does this feel like? What's our music for the moment?
For me, and it took a while to get to this song for
Hmm.
whatever reason, because I was like, do we want to focus on forgiveness or trust or resentment? Like all these thoughts came up. And then finally, when I heard it, because it was just something more than anything, something more about the vibe than
Hmm.
necessarily the words. Slum Village, Tainted.
Hmm.
Side note, a good Slum Village radio like playlist
Man,
on
listen,
Spotify will get me through just about every single workday.
you can ride to it.
Oh my gosh, with Tribe and
Hmm.
Dwelle, and it's just a whole vibe. Anyways, Tainted, Slum Village. And of course, I think it's talking more specifically about a relationship between a man and a woman. But there's something about this idea of just the idea of me as tainted after a mistake, or just coming back from the blemishes of life and still I don't know, just still being. There's just something about the vibe of that, and there's something about just tainted in general. And I was like,
Yeah.
that feels like this conversation to me. What about you?
Mine is. I used to be a neo soul head back in the
Mm,
day, but
used to be. So.
don't do me. Mine is "Wings of Forgiveness" by
Mm-hmm.
India Ari.
You love you some
Um,
NDRE.
I do. She
Mm-hmm.
loved me back too.
Mm.
Uh, and forgive. But "Wings of Forgiveness," she talks about a relationship as well. She talks about like the guy's portion and how he should forgive. And she talks about her portion of the mistake and forgiving. But then she also goes into like maybe like a third verse of the song
Mm-hmm.
is about like learning to forgive herself.
Yeah.
Um, and it's pretty dope. It just talks about like this idea of, I see the mistake you made, I see the mistake I made, but I'm also able to look in the mirror and see the mistake, but I just forgive myself.
Mm.
It's okay.
I forgive myself. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And
I'm
all
just,
is well with my soul. Amen.
amen.
I'm affirming that
Mhm.
for both of us.
Look at you out here,
I grew.
catching and checking and changing.
Right? I grew in
Mhm.
this one little episode. Look at
Look
God. What
at
he do
there you
it?
go.
God in therapy, y'all. God in therapy. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Any other thoughts you want to add to this?
um, Not that I can think of at the moment. I always say that, and then I have another thought.
That's why I asked. Go ahead.
Man, just that we're worth the work that we're doing. Um,
mm, worth the work. Growing up in a super religious era when everything was about being worth the wait,
mhm.
to hear that change to I'm worth the work. I've heard someone else say, I love myself enough to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Dot, dot, dot.
Mhm.
Same vibe.
Yeah.
I really like that. I'm
Yeah.
worth the work.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
forever mood. I'm taking that.
Mhm. Ain't it though?
I'm worth the work.
Mhm. 'Cause this stuff that you know how much I talk about how I be mad at therapists. I'm tired of giving this lady my money for her to beat me up
She
in
don't beat you
therapy.
up. She just
It
giving
does.
you tools.
She's giving me tools, and she also confronts my bullshit.
Hmm.
But just this idea, even though I don't want to give up my copay, like I'm worth the work.
Yes, and you're worth the copay. You
Mhm.
got to.
Well, I mean, let your boy hold $40 then. Put your money where your mouth is. So.
Anyways, if you are joining from YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. You will get notifications when new episodes are dropped every 2 weeks. Love to hear comments from you as well. We respond to those. And if you're listening from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever we are on the internets, please, give us a follow and a great rating. Let us know what you think and let us know what you'd love to hear covered on within these conversations. And like we always say, life is gonna life. Life will always present you with the haze, but you, me, we all have everything that we need within us to navigate through it.
Absolutely. And you're not alone.
Not alone.
So join us next time. We appreciate you coming to join us this time. But no matter how you get to us, just know that we're all gonna navigate this journey together.
That's right.
We appreciate y'all. Peace.
Holla.
Why'd you take so long to come to